Hi, everybody. So yesterday we were talking about how to actually make this a better world. And once again, it becomes interesting that to be able to address these utopic sort of statements, that actually the answer to it is truly simple. But what it needs is a clear understanding of the underlying realities, a clear understanding of the history, and a clear understanding of the future, what the future may bring, if and when and how we continue to build a planetary community. And so basically, we all know that. The fascinating thing about this is that we all know that the best thing to do would be to go straight for the core problem and say, okay, if we all belong to one planetary council and we all are federal states, it's not going to happen overnight, but over the next century, we can talk about the different transformations, the different levels. We can start agreeing upon that, and we can start building in that direction. Once again, I said, and I'm convinced that with artificial intelligence and with equations and algorithms, we can work that out. The details, it's only a matter of scale, and it's a matter of planning and so forth. So the how, we've been able to build up amazing civilizations. So how to accomplish that is not going to be the problem. And once again, because we have enough time, we can always, every 5 years, check it out and see a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right, and all the nations will understand, and all the people will understand that, okay, this is a process, but it is for the better for our children and grandchildren, so we'll go with it, because it's a better alternative than anything else. Then you have that fascinating thing, like you decide, you go like, you know what, let's go for English because there's so much published in English and there's so much that has been done already in English, and let's use that as the second language. Everybody holds on to their own language, to their own culture, to their own clothing, their own music, the whole thing. But there will be a second language that we use, like, normal academic English. Because even within that language there are many differences of meanings. So there's something like academic, like Boston English or something like that. Just kind of clean. It's not too British, it's not too this, it's not too that. It's not too much of an accent, so that seems to be the way to go. As a European, I'm not English speaking, and so I learned English, and so, I just speak a normal English. A little accent here and there, and a few mistakes. That's fine. Who cares? The thing is to move ahead, and then I remember when I was talking to some friends, and I said that once. And some of the people said, yeah, but for example, Spanish, there's so many more people in the world that speak Spanish. And it's more ancestral, and, And I went like, yeah, I said that could be also, of course. Let's put in Spanish. I said, but the difference is going to be that when you learn a second language, the whole of Latin America, from early childhood, and it becomes second nature, with everything that comes with it. You're going to have an ability to understand the English cultures and what they write, and you're going to have access to their articles, and you're going to have access to their workspaces and investment and art, and you can enter their world as one of them and nurture yourself. And if it's the other way around, then you're going to be comfortable in Spanish, but they are the ones who are going to have access to all your know-how, which is also good. So you said, well, that's true. I said, yeah, you're going to be one step ahead of the game. It gives you an edge. There's nothing wrong about that. I said, not do it because of pride, do it because of common sense. And then someone else said, yeah, but it sounds a little bit like unfair because they're going to be in their comfort zone. For us, it's always going to be, because we're not going to use it that much. It's going to be a second language, so we're going to be a little bit in the disadvantage also. They don't have to do the effort. Why should we do? You go like, fine. I said, but in the English-speaking countries, let's say the United States of North America, you could simply say, okay, everybody can make a choice, doesn't matter which, but you have to choose a second language to study, which is going to be an advantage for them as a nation or whatever, or a federal nation, whatever. And because they will have people they will have access to their own people that will have these capabilities to communicate and to translate and so forth. Even unknown languages that are not spoken all that much. Communication is so important because we are in a world of information, and it's changing so fast. And even though we have now, for example, amazing translating machines and intelligence and so forth, but it still will need someone to supervise that and to correct it and to look into it. I read that kind of stuff, and my language is not Spanish either, but I speak it so long that even a very high-end, that you can tell, very high-end translations that are done with machines within on computer programs. And most of the time it's like, whoa, really nice. And then every now and so you capture a little word that's because of the pronunciation, that it translates the word that's not quite it. That's not the word meant to be. But of course, if you understand the two languages, it's not a problem. You understand it immediately when you read the subtitles. You go like, yeah, nope. So, and of course, humans also make these sort of mistakes. There's always going to be a glitch here and there. But one of the things that's important in languages is to know the vernacular language, and that allows you to communicate. So there's a lot of fields in which we could actually fuse, we could actually already come together. And I know that's been attempted in a certain way, but maybe we made that mistake by saying, like, let's take it one step at a time, but nobody really signed that agreement, or the nations haven't signed into it. It doesn't matter how. That's up to you guys, right? The how, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And it's going to be, there will be conundrums and trial and error and whatnot, but there you go. The important step is that how many nations do we have? 200 or something like that? Even tiny ones that have no GDP that's worth even mentioning, and there are little tiny micro nations, you know, a little island somewhere. But no, they're nations, they're sovereign. They're on the map, they have a map, they have a culture. And all those tiny nations, maybe, those very small ones, they can be maybe lumped together into one single group, and then they can work things out among themselves and then have a few spokespersons. That is all to be worked out, but basically high-level decisions should be made by a group of people that are in a democratic way, that are not always the same people to begin with, definitely, and but it should result in a relatively small group of people. Yeah, not too many. Of course, they will build up all these decisions and these agreements with their own basis, you know. So it's going to be a pyramid process from the ground up, right? But it's not like you have a bunch of, you know, old men that get together and they decide and then they socialize it, more or less. And people go like, well, yeah, whatever. I mean, you know, I don't know. They may complain about it on the internet. There's not much they can do about it, so they go out on the streets, you know, they holler for a couple of weeks, and then something else happens, so now they're hollering about something different, and this one particular thing, it just keeps going. Or they wait for a little bit, and then they replant it, they change the form a little bit, you know, they market it in a better way, and if it's not now, 10 years down the line, they get what they want. So that's not the way it should work. I mean, you know, you have too many technical people who have the means to make all this happen, and who can actually even shape the laws and everything. So that's not a good thing. That afterwards, when they have it all set up, they socialize it, and then the people have a week sort of to read it and to say, well, okay, yes or no. These kind of things, and sort of give them a few recommendations. We see that in politics all the time. It's a common practice. When the community wants something, it's a long, complex, difficult process, because it is stymied from within. The system blocks it, you know, the bureaucracy makes it difficult. But when bureaucracy wants to get something done, they can do it in 24 hours, even really big things. And so it's a matter of political will. Okay? It's a matter of political will. So basically what we have to do is, first of all, between all the nations, decide what is it that we do not want. And that's not going to be the leaders. Those are going to be the people. Pyramids, you know. You plan the questions, and people vote for it, and they even vote for questions. And how the questions must be worded. Because then you get the lawyers that are manipulating the language in order to leave little loopholes and whatever. And there's a lot of that going on too. You see, that's what we need to change. It's got to be straightforward and honest for the better of the planet. You said, you know, let's bury all these savvy hatches, all this manipulating and so forth, you know, and let's stop that from happening for some time, because this is a big thing. And besides that, it's okay because it starts still 100 years down the line, 50, at 25 years. So it's nothing immediate. Let's start working on this. And then 8 questions, or 12, or 10, the 10 Commandments. Something like that. That those first, the questions of saying, what is it we don't want? And for example, the world could say then, We don't want war. Ban war, ban chemical warfare and biological warfare and nuclear warfare capabilities completely. Put them all on their big rockets, take them all to one place somewhere, and shoot them all into space to get that stuff out of here, if that's possible. If not, dismantle it, putting it in storage, the materials that we can use them for peaceful purposes. That has to be worked out. That's technical. But the decision to do away with any weaponry and then we could say, okay, any offensive capabilities we do away with, right, completely, right? We do away with our armies. Armies will only be like the National Guard for internal security of the federal state, like state police and state National Guard, for example. Because these are big countries. There always will be problems with crime and stuff like that. And the borders, for example, there are always borders issues. So the best way to do this is that to make the borders thicker. First of all, there are no borders, because you're going to dissolve all the borders, but they're going to be state borders. So what you do is, the state border, you create a thick border that's maybe what, a few miles thick, right? That means that within that border, there is no policing, there is no real sovereignty. That belongs to the two of you. It's a nature preserve. And it's 5 kilometers thick. And it runs like all the way around. And if it's a river, then it's a few kilometers away from the river on each side. And you put up posts, with signs, and you make those borders there. And then you have a common or an international system that, patrols those borders. And, just to control crime and all that, that stuff. That will always be an issue. But it's like the Interpol, everybody's on the same page. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm starting to think, it will become complex when you grind it down to the nitty-gritty, as we call it. And there will have to be adjustments made in certain situations. But by and by, it doesn't matter, because it's going to be one flag. And you have your state flag, like Texas has its flag. In Ecuador, for example, we have the provinces. Each province has their own flag. And so you have the national flag, it becomes the state flag, it remains. But instead of a coat of arms, we would have a planet with an eagle on top and something like that. And, create one single symbol that would go in the center. And it would be the Planetary Council, the Supreme Council, and so forth. Then you have the regional councils and all that. You break it down. But for example, no armies, no big armies. Suddenly, we can create the World Bank and then regional banks, financing systems. We can create everything on the same page. Everything on the same page. Once again, it's a matter of algorithms. The important thing is, for starters, if we eliminate all this military spending, and the hybrid goes with it, because now we are all one country. There will still be rules and so forth for migration, you know, but once again, we're starting off 175 and 50 and 25 years from now. So, tranquilo. You don't really need any armies. I mean, it sounds almost magical. So trillions and trillions of dollars, you know, you're going to end up with 10% of that. Just for national security inside the borders. And to have these aircraft carriers and all, you can have a couple to patrol the coast or whatever. But by and by, you're going to start ending up using those to transfer airplanes, civilian airplanes, from one place to the next, like big freighters. So maybe we don't want to have any armies and no offensive weaponry whatsoever. But at the same time, we can also say, okay, we want to, no more passports. I mean, just your ID to move around. And if your ID is requested, you have to show it. For no cause. See who you are and have a registry. And yeah, maybe a chip. A chip that's limited. It's just your number and your code. Who knows? It's up to everybody to decide. And we can have the other end. No borders. No passports. No, you want to move, you move. Once again, it can be staggered, you know. It doesn't happen fully. But if you want to have workforce going to one place because there's better possibilities and higher salaries and this and that, people are going to go to where the jobs are. But if there's no war going around, we're going to have more possibilities of investment. And now also the nations will be able to just go and invest in other parts of the planet, anywhere. And so production can happen anywhere. So what you do is you standardize the environmental laws and the labor laws for everybody. You know, because big money is going to want to have that. You know, create cheap product and have slave labor to make more money. But ultimately the consumer will pay for it. Right? And if you have industrial capability with manpower and you combine those two, you're going to have so much production that's going to bring down the prices. There's a lot of benefits. Education for everybody. Education must be the way to go, because we will never survive as a species on this planet unless we have everybody very well educated. And it doesn't mean anything bad. Some people don't want to sit in an office. They hate that stuff. They want to be outdoors. Some people want to be a truck driver or a boat driver, a sailor. They love the sea. They need to be outdoors. They cannot be between four walls, you know, with all that goes on in offices and all the strife. And I just don't want to be part of it. I just want something more pragmatic. We're not all the same. We're not all built the same. One of the things that we may choose to do collectively is to eliminate the industry that what industry produces and provides has to be in a category, placed in categories. and such which is environmentally unsound and unnecessary and frivolous simply just doesn't get the permit unless it pays huge taxes. And us, human civilization, we start cutting back on frivolous consumption. If we want to solve the problems of the planet right now, just the way it is, all we have to do is, urban populations, mostly, is to cut down 30% on stuff. I would call it J stuff. Cut out the J stuff, which means junk stuff. Stuff that's going to turn into junk. And also, for example, it's mandatory that everything must last. That everything must last properly. That you cannot create something that's going to break down and then it cannot be repaired. That, things must last at least 10, 15 years. That it must be designed in such a way. So people are not buying many times over and over and consuming. You're going to have something that's going to be useful enough that it's not a matter of having every year the latest one and the latest upgraded technology. We're okay with the technology for 5 years. So there's not going to be a new model of a cell phone coming out for 5 years. And every 5 years there's going to be this huge hype. And everybody's going to buy new. Because now they're ready for it. You see what I mean? Just something a little bit more sensible. And the chain value. You have people in Bangladesh and in whatever, or in China, and they're making these very fancy things, or people collecting the silk or the alpaca and so forth in the mountains of South America, or silk in China, whatever, or dyes and everything that's sort of luxurious, and that are sold like these very high-end brands and so forth. And the people actually who are raising the animals, that are collecting and that are, cleaning and producing the material, they really get peanuts. They get very, very little. It's the intermediate person, who brings it all together and then sends it to the factory, who collects a lot of money. And then the factory, of course, they have these wonderful coffee beans that are hand-selected, hand-picked, or cacao beans that come into the factory, and they mix it and they do everything, the magic, and then they win 1,500% because it's aggregated value. They sell it directly to the customer. Meanwhile, the people that have the land, that have the sun, the water, the air, the soil, that have to plant it, that have to keep it free from plagues and insects, that have to spray it, nurture it, prune it, and then finally harvest it, dry it, sun-dried and everything, so you can put it on the package sun-dried, and then they have them to toast and roast it properly, or if not, they have to hand pick and select it, so there's nothing complicated that you have to do when it gets to the factory. You just throw it in and you start roasting it and producing it and selling it. So they do really 80% of the work. It's interesting because some countries, like Switzerland, they sell chocolate and coffee. I think they're the largest coffee dealer in the world, Nestle, whatever. Chocolate, Nestle, and others. Hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And there's not a cocoa plant and there's not a coffee plant that grows in Switzerland. Not a single one. Ever. Can't. Climate. Now, Belgium is the second largest exporter of finished product of chocolate. The largest one is Germany. There's not a single cacao tree that grows neither in Belgium, neither in Germany. Neither or neither. So you must guarantee the equality. If not, what's going to happen? Okay, look what goes on in Africa now. After 200, 300, 500 years of slavery, we have done everything to the African people. And yet we go to church and we just mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, and we still consume these products, which we know actually are blood diamonds or they are whatever mineral that comes from Africa or a product that comes from Africa. And we consider that, I guess the person from the street doesn't even think about it. We're just living our life. We're not really involved in all of this. But now the time has come. Africa's saying no. We are a people. And that voice is resounding around the world now. And right now, because of all the problems in Africa and the Middle East, we have tens of millions of African and Arabian people in Europe. And Europe is saturated with immigrants with a different culture. And probably underlying all these people they hurt. We'd say they're angry. They hurt. And they create disruption in the European culture. It's going to take, like it should, normally the integration of a people will take about 4 generations. Now we have this hot potato in Europe. And we brought that upon ourselves because, like Meloni said, we should take care that these people can develop, in their own right, their own economies and their own well-being. We should stop intervening. We should negotiate with them on the same level, with dignity, and not squeeze them for whatever we manage because we have the advantage. They're handicapped. At the beginning, favor them so they can get some headway. We will have good produce. They will have a provident living. And once people are living a normal life, normal middle-class life, people don't want to leave. When you have a nice middle class, I'm not talking about upper middle class, I'm talking about a normal middle class, economic. We're not talking about spiritual or intellectual or philosophical or whatever, or humanistic. We're just talking about, how much money you have at that moment in time. Because there are no classes. That doesn't exist. There is no upper class. If anyone considers her or himself in a class above another group, they automatically put themselves in a lower class. When you see those people, you go like, you see they still have a ways to go. And they go to these fancy places to get out of the car, and they just go like this. They don't even look at the person, the assistant, whatever. And and they flaunt them with the nice clothing. And they go inside and they out themselves, and they're spending a load of money, which the other ones, what they do is they grovel. They're just there like, and give him all the, that chic, high-end service, with a tie and a little twist and a little twing. And the other ones love it, to be pampered, and they're very important. And sophistication. It's not sophistication. There's nothing sophisticated about all that. They're putting it all up, and they're just creating this hype about all of this, and you go and pay for it because it's exclusive, just not everybody can pay for something like that. And you pay for it because it's an important experience. And some of it is kind of nice, but ultimately these very intelligent people, it's a setup. They set up the rich, and the rich want it because it's unique, it's something special. So it's only for those who are rich. If you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. That's insecurity, of course, So we are middle class, and then we become high middle class, and then we really work and fight really hard to get up there. So now we can finally, with our family, go to the country club or this or that, and now we are successful in life. I have been in Sands Point, Port Washington. I went to the country club over there. I have been on luxury cruise ships, wining and dining with, people from all around the world. I'm a naturalist, so I work with the public as a natural history interpreter. We take people around the Galapagos Islands, showcase of evolution, and we're in charge of hosting. The Galapagos Islands is all about natural history, so it's not about fine wining and dining, but there's some of that on the ships too. So I'm used to that environment. I'm a European. At home, they would teach us how to set up a 5-course meal and 7-course meal and whatnot. In Europe, it's all about that kind of stuff, that your pinky finger and classic arts and architecture, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, il faut le lire. La même chose avec Victor Hugo, etc. Tous les classiques, il faut les avoir à la maison. Bouvard et Pécuchet, tu sais quoi. All these French writers and Oscar Wilde and the British and this and that. I never read Shakespeare. I started once and it's like, I read some really interesting authors like Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. But the thing is that they are fascinating writers. I mean, just their minds, their brains are like, well, one paragraph is half a page. So by the time you get to the end of that paragraph, it's like you have to read it really slow. And it's meant for that, I assume. It's very, very deep. And so that's also very European. I mean, so what? Fifirucci. Frivolous aspect of life. It's like once I was on a cruise on a small yacht. And the World Symposium, or whatever, of the celebration of the 5 best chefs in the world takes place every year in a different location. And here it had taken place in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. And so after that, 3 of the 5 winners decided to make a trip to the Galapagos Islands, and so with their families they chartered a yacht, and I was invited as a naturalist because I speak several languages, and one of them was Italian, and 2 of these winners were French. So of course, I mean, the food was incredible, but at one point they said, "Listen, we would like to cook something. Can we?" I said, "Absolutely, no problem. I will be with you in the kitchen. I love cooking, and I think I'm a good cook, and I'll be in the kitchen and translating with our own chef, and so forth, you know." And so finally, what we did is we got some lobsters, which we bought from a lobster boat, and then we had a fishing boat, and because we were looking out for something fresh. And we bought grouper, which is a wonderful fish. And so one of him, Philippe Beaucou's, I have his autographed menu of his chateau, because his restaurant is a chateau with vineyards and old, you know, wine bodegas with a chariot pulled by Percheron horses, and it has 3 helicopter pads, because that's where the president of France comes for lunch, and dignitaries. So it's a little special restaurant. Amazing. Anyway, so he was going to cook. And so he looked around a little bit, and at one point he said, "You know, what spices do you have?" And I said, "Well, this is what," oh no, it says McCormick. No, not for our kind of cuisine. He said, "Everything has to be fresh." So what the chef had on board fresh were some asparagus and some other herbs. And so he chose that, like it was some parsley and asparagus. And all the rest of it was, he did take a little bit of pepper, I remember, and salt. And so what he did is he took sweet butter, he put it in a big pan, he put the fish in the wine, in the butter, he put a bottle of wine, a very good white wine on top of it, and he put those herbs in there, and salt. Covered it up, put it on a low fire, and when that was ready, our cook already had ready some salad and potatoes and whatever, you know, and some rice and so forth. And so all that was ready. And then they brought out the fish and put it on a big plate and served it. And I go like, well, you know, that's when he was telling me about it, we were in the kitchen like that. You see, I wouldn't get past his secretary. A man like that and his wife, they wouldn't have time for me. But we spent a whole week with these people, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the same table. It was wonderful. And the time I spent with candidates for the Nobel Prize, and we're sitting on the beach or we're sitting on deck looking at the stars, you know, with a jacket on because it's windy and cold, you know, and talking about existential philosophy. I've done that for 50 years. I had the privilege to spend time with people that you wouldn't, absolutely wonderful, and the most unassuming. They wouldn't want anyone to carry their piece of luggage. Nah, don't worry about it. They're helping with the plates, you know, the waiter. they would bring it together and carry it to the kitchen. And you're talking about people, right? You know, so people with greatness of heart, true nobility. Nobility can come from anywhere. Money, it's great if you have money. You can afford to be more generous and to do things. It's a blessing, beautiful blessing. So anyways, when I talk about all of that, now I lost a little bit the point that I was trying to make. Typical. See, I'm a drifter. I go all over the place. But anyway, what we need to do is people to establish this awareness. Let me pick up now the string and maybe go in another direction that I talked about yesterday. What is to be successful in life now? Everybody wants to be the billionaire. That's all we, online, in the media, everybody's always talking about the billionaires. And the funniest thing is that now we have billionaires sitting there and they're being interviewed. And they're being interviewed about anything in the world. Because somehow we have this impression that they have been largely successful, and so they must be very, very intelligent. I remember once I read a story when I was a kid about this one guy who was one of the wealthiest persons ever. And you know what his business was? Buttons. He owned the European American market of buttons. Any button, and from anywhere, any shape, any color, any make, it came from, and he had them, and he would distribute and sell them. And you think about a button costs, you know, pittance, but hundreds of millions of buttons. And everybody, you know, loses a button. So, and nobody paid attention to him. Nobody knew. He had all these different, the same company, but, you know, with different outlets, you know, distributing buttons in all the countries, everywhere. In Africa and South America, everybody buys buttons. And all the women have their little button kit, you know, with a variety. In case they lose a button, whatever, they have something that looks like it that they can mend on the spur of the moment. So no, you don't have to be all that intelligent. You have sometimes just to be street smart and to realize that, oh, this is something everybody needs. I'm going to go in on that and I'm going to sell it. I'm going to continue selling. I'm going to live very low key and I'm just going to keep scaling it. Once you realize how it works on one level, you scale it and you let it scale. And you go franchises and all that. Other people work with real estate and flipping or long-term real estate and whatnot, speculating. They become very, very intelligent, very they understand one particular thing very well, and they stick to that, and that's what they do. Doesn't make him intelligent, doesn't make him wise, doesn't mean that I can have a conversation with these people about culture or whatever, literature, and so forth. I may have a person who's an intellectual, great artist, great writer, great mathematician, and they can just not be bothered with money issues. I am one of them. I'm not the smartest cookie. I'm not saying I am something really exceptional. I'm not. I'm just like another person. But, you know, I've tried and I had my ventures and everything, but somehow there's something in my subconscious underlying it all that goes like, this is not the most important thing. Most important thing is to be talking on this phone right now. Sharing, these silly ideas, which I personally find the most important things to talk about ever, and it must be talked about now, because the time is now. Because the situation, the reality that we have built up as the most intelligent being on the face of Earth, which we are absolutely not, right? Maybe we have a logical, analytical mind and a mathematical and a commercial and whatnot, but wisdom, no. I mean, you can say, yeah, we're very intelligent. How's that working for us? It's not. We're cavitating towards the Third World War. Believe me, I won't be around to see it. My kids are going to have to deal with it. But we are. It'll start with, it's always trade wars, remember? It starts, just with tariffs and this and that, and then blockades, because politically, ideologically, they don't agree one with another, so they do a blockade and embargoes and all of that. Sounds familiar? And you get inflation, you get, all that. Sometimes when the economies are really screwed up, that's the only outlet viable is to go for war. Hopefully the outcome is that you win, so you gain the assets of the other nation, and the other nation has to pay up. You're going to have to work for the next 50 years paying you off. But if we can change our culture, and it means to be successful, means to have an environmentally, social, viable, sustainable lifestyle. To achieve that, equilibrium, balance, and harmony, to have that grit, that stamina, that vision, that wisdom, that willpower. Not stoicism, but just reasonable. No isms. Must be no isms of anything. No ideology. No, we create this one idea and then we put a name on it. It's an ideology. Society and humankind will evolve. So none of these ideologies can go on forever. They will have to evolve also. Yeah? It's like on a sailboat. If the weather conditions change, you have to change the sails. You have to adjust the rigging, but a storm sail is much heavier than another one which is light when there's very light wind. A normal sail will rip in the storm. It's too big, the boat will flip over. So you reef them, you make them smaller. If you have very powerful winds, gusts of wind, you put up a thick, heavy sail. That keeps the boat going and keeps it, gives you control of the boat. And you keep the airplane flying. So, for example, we have all these things about cars have to go faster and faster. And further and further. Airplanes have to go faster and faster, higher and higher. It's never enough. Why do we bullet planes now? The